Good evening, everybody. How you doing? How's everyone doing? Good. There we go. Fantastic. Welcome to MySec Southfield and the very first meeting of the OWASP Oakland County chapter. So we have some new faces, so welcome. Welcome. You guys are always welcome to come on out. The Southfield chapter meets the second Thursday of every month. So if you're interested in other security talks besides OWASP, please come on out. We usually meet right around 5:30 for dinner and then come out here at 7 p.m. sharp and have a great time. So thank you very much. All right, so my name is Brett Hansen. I'm the Southfield coordinator. There's other MySec chapters throughout the month as well. So if you're in different areas and you would like to attend those, we have MySec Jackson that meets the second Tuesday of the month. And we also have the coordinator right here. We have MySec Lansing that meets the second Wednesday of the month, and then MySec Southfield, which is the second Thursday, as well as MySec Grand Rapids, which just started up. They meet the second Thursday as well. If you're interested in other security events going on, let me know. I can send you some information about ISC Squared. They meet the fourth Tuesday of the month. North Oakland ISSA, which meets the second Wednesday, Motor City ISSA, which is the third Thursday, and Lansing ISSA, the third Thursday. So if you're in security, there's a lot of different meetings to go to. We all know what's the best one to meet up, right? Jackson. All right, so we're currently meeting at Town Square Food and Spirits. Please pass your thanks to the staff that provided the room and great service. We also will be receiving snacks, which is provided by Tech Systems. So if you get an opportunity to say hello to their staff as well, by all means do so. Be an active member of MySec. If you have a topic for a talk, let me know what you would like to see. If you'd like to give a talk, please see me because I'd like to get them booked up as far out as I possibly can. And we also are looking for people who enjoy writing about security who can post blogs on the MySec website. So if coming up in front of a camera isn't your ordeal, but you are a good composer and want to get out there and get your name out there, then we can get some posts up onto the MySec website. Show of hands, who wants to do that? All right. Also, join Slack. It's a great way to stay in connection with everybody. So if you go to mysec.us, towards the bottom of the main page, there is a link that will send you an invitation to join Slack. There's a lot of different channels. There's a jobs channel, there's a Jackson channel, a Southfield channel, and the great thing about Slack is if there isn't a channel you like, you can create one of your own. Cool.
There's an OWASP channel too.
Ooh, OWASP, thank you, I forgot about that. So there's an OWASP channel. So if you're part of OWASP, you want to be part of MySec, but yet still be part of OWASP, by all means. Announcements. MySec Social is Thursday the 28th at One-Eyed Betty's at 6:30 to 8:30. Last month, on the coldest day of the year, we had almost 30 people out there. It was a really good time. So by all means, come on out, have some food, some drinks, and have a good time. Some events that are coming up beside Columbus is March 1st. If you're interested, I have a link here. It's only $25. It's actually a really great little conference. It's a one-day conference, and it's at the Police Academy Center. Let's see. We also have an upcoming event, Introduction to IT Security and the Bash Command Line Interface. Jason, did you want to speak to that at all?
I can. I just wasn't planning on it, but
Oh.
I can.
Well,
so you're just going to announce it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So a couple of us put together a little bit of a walkthrough. It's kind of a group walkthrough through a CTF. It's a popular CTF. It's online. I've done it a number of times, probably close to 24 actually, serving over probably 200 people so far with it. It's literally just a introduction. It's for all levels, but we'll go through the command line. It's a Ubuntu machine. We'll talk about all of the different security things. We'll talk about bashing passwords. We'll talk about account privileges and escalations and all kinds of weird stuff. But we'll also talk about how advanced the command line is that people really don't know that it has there. So like spell checking and the ability to go back in your commands and do all kinds of real funky stuff. We'll talk about that. It's about 10 hours long. It's free. It's at Baker College, Auburn Hills on the 9th.
And it's 10 o'clock until 6?
Pretty much till we get done, but yeah, 6.
Okay.
Kind of where we're shooting for.
I've done it once before. It's a lot of fun. It was very educational. I'm looking forward to doing it again. It was about 2 years ago that I did that with you, Jason, and I learned a lot when I was first getting into the security, and I definitely want to see what my mindset is now after 2 years of experience. So hopefully we'll all see you out there. It's going to be a good time. There's an Eventbrite registration for it. I will get that posted onto the MySec website if you're interested.
Which bakery conference did you say?
Auburn Hills. So we do ask that you use the Eventbrite, even though it's free, because we're supplying food. We don't want to over-purchase because it's really kind of coming out of my pocket, but we don't want to under-purchase either. So if you're going to come out, please just, even if you're going to use a fake name or whatever, just use Eventbrite.
Excellent. So I look forward to seeing everybody there. Also, Converge Detroit is only 90 days away.
Woo!
You believe that? It's May 16th through 17th. Early bird tickets are still available for $100 up to the end of the month. After that, I think they go up to 150.
Yeah, it's about 150, I think.
Okay.
And the CFP is open too.
Yes.
For workshops and speakers.
So the CFP is still open for Converge as well as workshops. So things are going to be a little bit different this year. There's going to be a lot of workshops. And so if you have something that you want to train somebody else on, by all means, we're looking for people. All right. Circle City Con is May 31st through June 2nd, which is a really good conference as well. Are there any other conferences that anybody wants to share that I might have missed? GERCON, that's way in October though.
But there's CFPs open.
True, thank you. So yeah, GERCON CFP is now open, so submit a paper. Submit one to Converge, to GERCON, to all of them, and speak everywhere. I did miss one. Where is that? North and Oakland ISSA is looking for speakers for their 2019 edition of DCON, which is April 11th and April 12th. All right, job postings. Is anybody looking for a position? Oh. Excellent. So are there people out there that have positions open?
Oh wait, sorry, other way around. I messed that up.
All right, Kyle?
No, yeah. So consumers, we've got 2 positions open right now. We have a security engineering job, and we also have we're looking for a .NET developer that would also do vulnerability management. So kind of working with our developers and doing vulnerability management.
Okay. Anybody else have any job openings they'd like to share?
PwC, Pricewaterhouse. We're currently looking for level 2 or level 3 SOC analysts. So if you're interested, ping me offsite and I can connect you.
Jason?
Illich Holdings, where I work, has 2 level 1, level 2 SOC analyst positions open and 2 intern positions. So if you're in school currently and want to do a summer internship, I think it's about $18.50 an hour. It's not horrible. As well as I think I've got one for GDPR individual.
Anybody else? Also, you can see they just brought in some food, which is supplied by Tech Systems. By all means, help yourself. Please, we don't like to have any leftovers. Is there any other special announcements? Jason?
Sorry, mid-drink. So we're doing the event that I just spoke about on the 9th. We also have created a real-world CTF, which we will deliver probably in the next month or 2 here and open it to MySec and other individuals. It takes about a month to do the actual CTF. There's some travel involved, so you actually have to go around and hack some different locations. We've spent quite a bit of time on it. It's actually quite fun. We will need a couple people to do it outside or before that, so I'll probably be tapping a couple of you that I know to help with that. And then I have another event that we haven't scheduled yet, which is Introduction to Enterprise Firewalls, which will go over a number of the open source firewalls to begin with. Again, it's going to be like another 10-hour event. We'll conclude on an actual enterprise firewall that everybody can actually get into. That's more of a UTM, but we'll post that one here as well.
Fantastic. Any other announcements? All right, without further ado, we have Introduction to Web Application Scanning by Holly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Happy Valentine's Day. Start off by saying that. I know the wife's watching. Love you. So I wanted to give a talk on an introduction to Zap. I've used Zap several times before in the past, and I think that it's underutilized as an open source tool compared to some of the other tools out there like Burp. I've discovered myself additional features part of Zap by putting this together, and I wanted to share those with you guys. I almost went to bed. I'll just do it like this. Alrighty, so my background. I'm a Vulnerability Senior Associate at PwC. I've been in InfoSec for about 3 years. Threat and Vulnerability Management for 2 of those 3 years. I'm currently a Master's Candidate at SANS. Current certifications, Security Plus, GSEC, GCIH, GCIA, and GPEN. I love breaking things in production. No, really just breaking things in general. They tend to be in production though. The only thing I really consider myself an expert at is finding ways that upset the wife. I like learning. There's always an improvement. There's always something that you can learn and do better. So I'm a big proponent of continuous improvement. So what is Zap? A lot of people reference it as a web application scanner. It's far beyond that. I consider it a Swiss Army knife for web application testing. Stands for Z Attack Proxy. It's a non-transparent proxy. You can set it up to where it sits in between you and the request going out. You can intercept those requests and manipulate them any which way you want. You can even port scan with it. It's used by developers, it's used by pen testers, it's used by threat and vulnerability management a lot. It also allows you to utilize a full API, so you can automate anything and everything in Zap. Completely open source. The community behind it is amazing. There's so many different sources that you can reach out to, different forums that actually respond almost instantly to help address a question or a concern you may have. You can even write your own plugins. It is written in Java, so if you know how to code in Java, you can write your own plugins and go from there. Although the scripting, I believe, supports a few different other languages. So 4 modes in Zap. You got your safe, you got your protected, standard, and attack. I typically work in Zap under the standard mode. Typically that'll give me a wide variety of, okay, what's going on with this application? And it's not too intrusive. So even though it's open source, it is used in enterprise. One thing I can share from experience is you definitely do not want to be too intrusive in enterprise applications. When you're playing CTFs, by all means, switch to attack and DDoS the application. But in production, you're going to set off a domino effect, which can lead to additional alerts, your SOC team getting involved, your DDoS provider calling your CISO and saying you're under attack. That's never happened to me. But several things that can happen. So just keep in mind what you're scanning and make sure you have permission to scan it. So on your tables, you have the OWASP top 10. You're going to see 2017 on there. Not much has changed between 2013 to 2017. 2017 till today, those 10 really are the same. These are basic security configurations. These are mismanagement of credentials, just bad coding practices in general. I didn't want to read off the slide for you and give you a definition, make it boring. This talk is more meant to give you a quick overview, and we're going to dive in and do some actual testing. Some of the key things I wanted to cover, we're going to find some hidden directories. OWASP also has a great tool called Dura Buster, which allows you to find hidden directories on web applications that we're not supposed to find different ways to break in, manipulate the code, get back to the back-end server. There's a lot of cool things we can do. I want to show you how to adjust the spider in the scan settings. So when you get to an application, a crawler or a spider goes out and crawls the entire website. There's different methods on how to improve results, scan settings. There's a lot there that I wanted to cover. You can monitor your scan in real time, so you can actually see the requests going out.
What's the difference between the spider and actually using the cluster?
So the spider itself will go out and pretty much map out the web application. The tester itself will actually send commands in, like etc password, and try to find flaws in the code itself. It's more passive versus active, and it won't try to actually exploit or do anything harmful.
So it's safe to say that it follows links, does things like that?
Yeah.
Looks for common directories.
Absolutely. Looks for common directories. Has a pre-built password, pre-built directory list that'll search against. You can actually build your own directory lists if you want to pull down some from the internet. There's massive ones, there's decent sized ones, and there's very light ones, depending on the scanning you want to do. Thank you for that. I want to show you how to report your vulnerabilities, how to actually take a look at them. Very cool feature, so you can manipulate those vulnerabilities. So if you have tester, or if you have developers that won't remediate any of the medium or lows, you can actually change the settings depending on how critical the vulnerability is and make that a high depending on your policy and your standard at your organization. And I wanted to show you a real quick overview of how you can intercept requests to different applications, manipulate the values, and capture the responses as well. Any questions? Please do not use the attack mode on anything on the internet without express written permission. I am not liable for anything you do or any charges you may face. Being an InfoSec and being as analytical as we are, we tend to see something and we kind of want to explore it because we're just curious. I just ask that you do have permission to what you're scanning. If it's internal within your router or locally hosted on your machine, have at it. If it's over the internet, just be careful what you're doing. So the first thing I wanted to talk about when we dive into the tool is the quick start option. When you get into Zap, it's so easy that you can literally throw in your URL in there and click attack. Spider starts off, and once the spidering is done, then the active scanning starts off. These are all pre-built default settings by Zap. They're very mild in terms of how intrusive they can be, and these are some of the things that they actually scan for while the scanner is running. Path traversal, remote file inclusion, cross-site scripting, SQL injection. My ears perk up or my eyes widen when I see OS command line injection. I mean, that's the holy grail. One thing I will note is in today's world, we're a little bit more smarter in terms of exposing servers directly to the internet. But if a hacker's going to get in, they're going to come in through a web application. They're going to find a flaw. They're going to redirect it to a bad server that's a copycat. They're going to capture your data. An example is, I believe it was, which airline was it? I'm not going to name the name, but it was an airliner it was a very well-known airline company that had people redirected and gone to a different website, captured login credentials. A few months later, another airliner had their forms attacked and had a keylogger in their forms, and all the credit card information was stolen.
So they did this redirect, and nobody noticed that maybe the SSL cert was wrong.
The SSL cert, when it was first introduced, was an indicator to the general public. Today, more so, you can generate a false SSL cert, and you'll still get HTTPS, and it could be a malicious cert.
So,
Please.
it's okay.
Please.
So essentially what you can do is you can set up a bogus domain, and it's very easily to create a certificate for that bogus domain.
Right.
So let's say you're kind of typo squatting with the domain, and you redirect to that other domain. The certificate's going to be 100% legitimate. Especially, it's really easy to do when you're using Let's Go Encrypt or what else.
Yeah, let's go or let's encrypt. Let's encrypt. That's what
Let's
it's
Encrypt, sorry. It's incredibly easy to do.
I did that. I'm reading the Hacker's Playbook 3, and I set up a domain on cheapdomains.com and bought an SSL cert for $1.99. The cert was more expensive than the domain.
Wow. But in spite of the fact that you don't have a domain that matches the victim, you still
Well, it'll match, but unless you're specifically looking at it, you won't see what it's matching. It'll match the actual redirect. It won't match the abc.com or whatever company that you're redirecting from.
The human is the weakest link, and if you've made it
Okay, that's what
good
I was,
enough
that's what I was
to
like, okay.
get past the human, you're in good shape.
How are they making this happen? I'm like, okay, just common misspellings or something like that. It's almost the same.
Yep. You can also create a script to pretty much go through your web applications and do specific things. Let's say you have a enterprise scanner. It's one of the big threes, Qualys, Nessus, or Rapid7 Nexpos, and it takes 9 hours to scan production. If they're deploying code in a certain area, I like to pull up Burp or Zap and test the specific URIs that they're going to change the code in. And you can write a script that pretty much tests for the fix that they're implying. So you can really isolate and shorten your time. You can even do that with the open source tools. In my opinion, that's my go-to. I won't run a Qualys or a Tenable scan because it just takes too long and it's hitting everything. You can pretty much direct and dissect what you want scanned and produce reports and results just on the code being changed. In threat and vulnerability management, when it comes to web apps, that's critical. If you're scanning on a quarterly or monthly or weekly basis, keep that scan cycle the way it is, because you have people watching that outage window in case it does come down. You don't want to introduce more risk to the environment than you have to. All right, so our targets for today. I didn't want to set up a local VM. I wanted to use something online and available to anybody to go home and try without having to set up their whole infrastructure. So webscantest.com, you can actually log in. Username, password, right up there. And zerowebappsecurity.com. Two different sites. They range in time to scan. The first one's a little more inclusive on the types of vulnerabilities we want to see. Zero Web App Scan's a banking site where you can kind of see how those are easily attributed to previous attempts at hijacking links and manipulating web applications for banks. We'll be doing passive and active scanning. Quick definitions. Passive, we're not manipulating the data at all. Active, we are. So I'll show you how we can actually capture the request and change the user agent string or change the type of request. We'll be yep. Sorry about that. Oh, I'm on. All right, so we're going to switch here. About that slide. We're going to open up Zap. Now, Zap is available on Linux, Mac, and Windows. Just as an installer, you can download and install it. I prefer running it on Linux, but I have not seen a difference in the Windows variant at all if you want to run it in your Windows environment.
It's 100% Java, right?
Yes. So, portable to almost all three.
Did you sacrifice the demo god?
Yeah. Funny story, actually. This test site was actually offline as of 8:30 or 9 a.m. today. After I found it last night, I messaged Brad. I'm like, "Here's the site I'm using." He's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh shoot."
They were updating for the new dirty bot.
Let me go ahead and make this a single display so I can walk through. Did I kill the screen?
Wait for it.
While he's doing that, everybody passed their.
It's coming. It's coming.
Right?
There we go.
It's Manjaro.
What's that?
It's Manjaro.
The
Oh, come on.
was it Stat D? Really?
Nobody
Nobody?
already changes.
Mirror.
So there's a kind of 0-day escalation bug that came out for Linux boxes, specifically any that are running snapd, that allows you to make, as a standard user, administrative accounts without any kind of challenge response. So everybody's like updating all their Linux boxes today, and that might be why you're having some issues, right?
I'm praying it works. I do have a couple extra backups in case. I think the open discussion format, where if anyone has a question about something I'm pointing out, they can just raise their hand or shout it out loud. It doesn't matter. but the engagement I think is a better approach. So when you first open up Zap, you can set it up in a persistent session where it's going to retain all the data you're doing and save it to a file. I typically don't unless I see the results I wanted to see, and then I can still save it as a session, even if I bypass the screen. This is the quick start screen I was talking about. So we're going to start off with webscantest.com. Enter in your attack site. You're going to click attack, and then you're going to monitor the progress right down here. And then there you go. You see a spider at the bottom crawling the sites. What's cool about the spider here is you can actually export the results while it's running. If you wanted to review what's going on, you can actually take a look at the exports as a CSV. You can actually take a look at the requests it's sending to be able to return this kind of value. You can go up to the request and respond field here once the scanner starts. Click on one and you'll be able to see the requests going out. Over here, you're going to see your sites that it found. So your main site here, your top level domain is going to be your webscantest.com. We kind of want to wait until it pops with more data, so I'm going to cover the spider a little bit more in more depth. So under your messages in your spider, there's 3 key things I look at when I run a scan. One is I look at this response code over here. I'll be able to identify whether it's a redirect, whether the server's up, whether it's a false directory. Is that the term? Whether the directory is valid, whether the server forbidden errors might show up. The next thing is the highest alert. You can kind of take a look at your alerts a little early and see what it's finding just from crawling itself. And this is still passive. We're not manipulating any data yet. And then what the meat and potato is for me here is the tags. I like taking a look at these scripts. There's forms and passwords there. In these scripts itself, you'll be able to identify API keys, hard-coded credentials. This is where the holy grail is if you're a pen tester or if you're in threat and vulnerability management and you really want to hound your developers on using proper coding practices. So over here, I'll see the scripts. These are PHP running in it's a PHP site. So let's see. I think the spider is done, so it's actively scanning now. Here are going to be your subdomains as well. Your robots, you see your requests and responses, but under response, you'll actually see the HTML format. We'll see here in a second what it looks like when it actually finds an issue. I'll point it directly to the code.
Is the spider smart enough to understand scope?
Absolutely. So, scope comes up a lot, and I completely overlooked that one, but thank you for that. Is if you, before you even start, you can go ahead and change your session properties. You can exclude certain URIs that you don't want to scan. You can actually just set it to run a spider, not an active scan, until you pretty much map out what's on that top level domain. And then you can specify it down in here as exclude from proxy, scanner, or spider. And you'll be able to essentially direct the spider in the direction you want it to go. Another cool feature about it as well is even if you don't start off here, you can launch the JX browser built in the Zap. Go to your URL and start clicking into the directory you want crawled and scanned. So you don't just have to give it a target, you can manually go in there and do it yourself. Thank you for that. So we're going to take a look over at a couple of the spider, or one last thing on the spider is you can direct it to spider by a specific URI as well. Back to the point where if code's changing only on a couple URIs under your top level domain and you want to scan it directly, you can go ahead and populate that in there and scan it. And one advanced feature I wanted to bring up is the depth. You can set the crawler to go X amount of depth within the domain itself. If you wanted to go maybe six levels in, 7 levels in. If you're really not limited to time, jack it up to 30, 40. It'll give you a real good scope of what's going on. One way to do this manually, or one way I do this manually is just click directly into the browser and go to the part of the website I want scrawled or scanned. So here we go here. You'll see this populate. Let's go to that. You'll see it grab other URLs. If you're scanning anything in the cloud, not hosted internally at your environment, you'll want to definitely exclude Google, YouTube, whatever third-party plugins or redirects it has that it's not owned by you and you have no authorization to scan. But over here, you can log in and it'll be able to do a fully authenticated scan from there.
Is there any way to easily do that? Like say, exclude third-party links?
As long as you set the scope to the URLs you're authorized to scan.
Okay, then it does that automatically.
It does that automatically.
You got links to YouTube, Facebook, any of those
Yeah.
places that goes, okay, yeah, this is off limits.
So those, I believe, will show up as grayed out. It won't be part of your scan. And there's actually a cool feature to exclude those from your scan report as well, so you have a nice clean scan report. Test user, test pass. All right, now I'm in, and now I can actually go ahead and have it crawl database injection, cross-site forgery. You can really go to town on it. You specify really where you want it scanned. If you just want it all scanned, just start clicking around everywhere. You don't have to be specific. The crawler will work regardless. If you want to take a look at the output, maybe it's not picking up the directory you want, you can switch back. You can export it, like I said, over here and open it up and take a look at the last thing crawled. You can actually pause the scanner. You can stop it completely and you can relaunch it at any given time or any given URI as well. So URI is the extension of the top level domain. So if it's webscantest.com, you can do webscantest.com/passwords or whatever the directory is you want to scan. You can start it directly from there. If we jump over to active scan, there's a few different things here that you can do. You also got your export feature here. You can pause and stop the scan at any given time. Let's say it's causing too much latency on the network and the application is not being able, it's not giving you the ability to monitor it in real time. So in a past experience, I've had to run a scan to see what happens on the monitoring side. So we have alarms go off if an application is non-responsive. We have automated scripts that go into an application and just make sure it's up and running. So we'll give it some bogus commands just to see if it gets a response. And at that given time, once in a quarter, it's kind of a failover test where you want to run a scan while that's running, just to see if it's impacting the overall performance of the application. You get a better idea of when to run your scans and when to run your testing. So that's why that pause feature is golden to me. You can actually keep an eye on it and see what stage it's doing. What is it doing exactly? These are some of the things I highlighted in the slides that it's running over. So the file incursion, cross-site scripting, SQL injection, command line injection, directory browsing. You can skip these completely. You can fast forward to them. So you got really a large amount of flexibility in what you can or cannot do, depending on your scope of work. You can even watch your response chart in terms of timing, how fast your requests and responses are going out and coming in. From here, let's just say I wanted to configure my scan. Obviously, I don't want to cause issues in production. there's a policy manager built in where you can add multiple different policies or modify your default policy. In here, you're able to set, let's see, can I zoom in so you guys can see this better? No, it won't let me. Well, over here this is your alert threshold, your attack strength. Threshold, you get fewer potential flags. Your attack strength is fewer attacks. If you really if you have an application in dev that's not in production, go ahead, crank it up. You really want to hammer it, because if you can bring it down, someone else can. And whoever's running OpenVAS across the world, scanning your application, does not care if they bring down your application. They're using full intensity, pretty much DDoSing it at a point without even knowing what they're doing. You can go ahead and select different type of thresholds on the type of attacks you want to do. So back up top to the attack policy. So information gathering, go at it. I don't care. It's not as intrusive as injection or any of the miscellaneous stuff. You can actually script it to run a certain type of attack. You want to see if you want to recreate in Zap that you found in a different scanner. So let's just say they had SQL injection and they implemented input validation. But you know this one string keeps bypassing it. You can recreate that string as part of a script in Zap and replay that attack to see if it's going to work or not. We're not going to wait for this to fully complete. Connection's a little slow. I did complete it at home, and I'll show you how to open a session, and it brings back the full state of the end results. At any point in time, you can hover over to the alert section here. You have three types of alerts: your high, your medium, and your lows. You can rarely see it, but red, orange, yellow. In here itself, you can take a look at the 4 issues it found. It will point directly to the code on the site where it found the issue. It'll highlight it for your developers. You don't have to be a full-scale developer to understand the code and how to fix it. Your job is to find it and send it over. You can double-click it and get a quick overview. And here, you can take a look at the risk rating and the confidence level. Now, if for whatever reason, if your company policy or if your leadership deems this to be a different risk than what Zap is throwing at you, you can change that with the drop-down. I typically, in my experience, tend to push towards patch once, patch all. If I have my developers engaged, if I have a leadership attention, I have more people willing to put all hands on deck to fix something, great. Here's the list of stuff you're fixing. Since you're doing this all at once and you're taking an outage, you might as well go ahead and give them everything. So I've actually, based on experience and based on the type of vulnerability found, I've cranked this up from a medium to a high. If I felt this was an externally facing application, mediums should be considered as high. More advanced pen testers out there can definitely utilize medium warnings that tend to be unmitigated or unpatched, and somehow, some way, find a way into a corporate network. Now, your confidence level, I will say, will vary depending if it's an authenticated scan or unauthenticated scan. Certain vulnerabilities need full credentials. They need to crawl the entire web application to be able to tell you 100% certain whether or not this vulnerability exists. It'll decrease your chances for false positives, also increase your value you're giving back to the business or the application team itself. And all this data is exportable. You'll see the clean report at the end of how it's set up. Different tools allow you to import this data from either a JSON format or, I'll show you up here, JSON XML or HTML report. I know Qualys, for instance, allows you to import reports. You can actually parse this through a Python script in JSON and import the vulnerabilities that way. There's a few different things you can do in terms of the the reporting aspect, but make sure I covered everything for alerts. Okay, okay, perfect. Over here is an example of how it highlights where the script is and the command it ran. Once this is done, let me go ahead and kill this and get to the session where it's been completed. And this is where you would go ahead and, before you even start, go ahead and exclude just certain URLs you don't want scanned. Perfect. Got it there. So at the end of the scan, one thing that caught my eye is the remote OS command injection. CLI access off the web application right on here.
Increase the font size?
It won't let me.
No.
Let me do this. Can you change the resolution? Maybe this will work. Better. That's a lot better. Okay.
Scroll up here.
We got something right. So OS command injection. Here was the request. It was on the whois.php. And this was a login error, bad username or password, test session ID. They included that ID. Where was the injection? Oh, domain zap cat at C shadow. So what you'll see a lot in the web application is they'll use the %2 sign as a space, or they'll add different hex in there, or even decimal. So they just try to bypass standard input validation and filtering. Sometimes if you encode, you don't even have to encrypt. Even if you encode your request, the system will still understand it, but your defense tools get bypassed. Response, there's your Etsy shadow.
This was an Etsy password.
Or Etsy password, I should say.
All you need is both.
You need both, and Hashcat, the latest version of Hashcat, used a 2080 Ti and set the record of the fastest passwords being cracked. It's amazing, and if you're not going to buy a 2080 Ti like me, you can actually spin up an AWS instance and pay for the graphic card usage on there and crack your passwords in the cloud. I wouldn't recommend it if you're a pen tester on an engagement without permission, but if you're playing a CTF, it costs you like $15-20, be able to crack those passwords, and God knows how much faster than your own local system. One other thing I did want to cover is Dura Buster. You don't need to launch the additional tool, Dura Buster by OWASP, if you don't have it installed or if you're not running Kali. You can run force browse. The one caveat to that is there's only one search list included by default. And you can just go ahead and drop down, select what website you want to test in the list, and it'll go ahead and try to find directories that are not available to the public without actually searching for them.
And although it seems like you wouldn't find these in today's environment, you find them everywhere. You find hidden directories, it's reliable as gravity. You find coding faux pas that give you access to, some directory that you're not supposed to be in. You see hard-coded credentials. You see a lot of this stuff. And sometimes it's just a legacy website that's on a server that has newer websites on it, right? I've always had really good success when you see version 2, version 3, or something in the URI. You go look for version 1. It's usually still there, which has some sort of injectable issue that gives you access to the same database that 2 is on. So again, it doesn't seem like this stuff would matter, but it does.
And touching on that, one of the things on the OWASP top 10 is error messages. Some people don't care what error message it shows. Well, I can tell you're running a mobile version of Apache, and I can go ahead and just load a module in Metasploit, and I just exploited your system. I am now root on your system. The amount of information, even the smallest bits and pieces, can give someone that's well prepared or even that knows how to Google the keys to the kingdom. Like I said, they're going to come in through web apps nowadays. They're not. I mean, phishing will always work because we are the weakest link. No one's. Well, I'm not going to say no one. A lot of the major corporations aren't exposing remote desktop on the open web. Different mechanisms have been put in place from a network perspective that make network pen testing a little bit more harder for them to do. But web application testing is open wide. Most people don't have in-house scripters or in-house developers that can go ahead and modify an application that's been deployed for the last 5 years. That project has been funded and closed, moved on, and it's just being maintained by a third party.
Real quick, how often, you just mentioned Dura Buster, and you mentioned that it's still relevant. How is that updated with new directories that become common or anything like that?
So the question was, how often will Dura Buster or Force Browse here, built in a Zap, go ahead and update the directories for it to search from? There are regular maintenance updates and they do update the lists as it comes by, but it's really, I guess the emphasis is really on the end user to go ahead and use the list that they want to use. So if I'm finding directories on my applications within my own organization, I'm going to kind of tailor that to my developer style of coding, to how the configurations are set up. But it's really on you. Yes, it does get updated, but it's really on you to kind of craft and cross-compile. You can find a lot of them on the community forums. You can find a lot just by Googling directory word lists. You can install Dura Buster separately. I know it comes with at least 3 or 4 different massive word lists. The bigger the word list, the longer it takes to scan. So it all really depends on your scope of work.
You can also have it just brute force if you want, which means that it'll just randomly generate content to throw at that URI and come up organically with stuff. I would add, sorry, I'm not trying to I would add though that just like the layers of the onion that you put in defense for security reasons, there are layers to pen testing, and this is just one of the layers that you would use to look for directories and files. Google dorking comes to mind immediately as a perfect pair for this to really find and flush out all of those weak links.
Robots.txt.
Yep.
It's a good one. And the I'm trying to think of the new type of file that's out there that restricts. I'm gonna forget its name. Sorry.
So robots is a little tricky. Some organizations keep it and put a message in there for crawlers. Can be polite, can be vulgar. Really depends on who you're crawling. But it still also causes a problem where if you want your site crawled and you want your site discovered and out there for the general public to easily find, you kind of need to have robots.txt there. So it's kind of playing devil's advocate on what to share and how to share it. At the end of the day, all security should be automated as much as possible, but for stuff, the way stuff is layered, the way stuff is implemented really needs careful consideration from all aspects. The current trends are kind of shifting away from vulnerabilities, exploits to risk. What risk does this application, what risk does this system or issue pose to the organization or to the business unit within the organization? You're going to want to take a look at it and understand, so, oh, look, I'm pulling all the password information on an internal website where it's behind 6 firewalls and no one's ever going to get to. Am I going to raise that to my CISO first, or am I going to raise my WAF that has every single port open on the internet? There's different things and different priorities. Being new in InfoSec or newish, you kind of want to raise your hand the second you see something because it's exciting. But chances are someone's seen it in a larger organization. I still bring it up and explain why hasn't something been done about it, and to see if there's a risk exception in place or other controls in place that had mitigated the issue. Because sometimes it's cheaper throwing it behind a firewall or a separate VLAN than going in and fixing a legacy system. So that's the Force browser. One of the last things I want to show you before I get into the output of the report is the actual interception of the requests. I think this is a really cool feature because you control what it's scanning, and you control the data. You can manipulate the data if you want to do manual testing. Now, manual testing, you're going to need some more skills to do. I've messed around with it. I've been able to produce results in it, but I by no means am a master at it. Before you start, I would definitely have like a quick reference guide. There's a few of them available on the community forum for OWASP that you can reference to see how to manipulate certain requests. You can kind of create the cross-site scripting, saying script, okay, script again, and it'll generate a pop-up script just saying okay. Different tools for different things, essentially all built into Zap. When you first open it up, I'll click this button over here. It's called setting a break within Zap itself. Your browser configuration has to be set to the same port number Zap is set. So typically a proxy is 8080. Localhost is what I set Firefox for. If you're not familiar with that stuff and really don't want to mess with that stuff, go ahead and launch JX browser. It's built in. It'll bypass all the SSL cert warnings. It's pre-configured to work right off the bat. So you don't have to set it up if you don't want to. There's additional plugins in Firefox that allow you to do certain things for a more experienced tester that may want to install those plugins and utilize other plugins with Zap to kind of further their scan results and their output. But as an intro, just launch the browser, go from there. I was testing this part out for the talk, and I just went to CNN.com just to see, how fast the spider just takes off before pressing the break point over here, and right away discovered an API key available to the public. It's that's what we were trying to remove the API key before we share it on YouTube.
Humans are humans. Your organization could have hundreds of developers. It's still going to fall to that weakest link, and it's typically the human.
Absolutely. And also, I wanted to bring this up, that this is not an API key directly with CNN.com. This is a third party to CNN that has a private key going to CNN. If the target breach, they got to their vendors, then they got to the company itself. This is how this kind of stuff happens. Open source tool, just a spider. I didn't even scan it, just a spider crawling the internet. This stuff is everywhere. Even the most technical inclined individual messes up security and configurations. I mean, you could have 1,000 certifications, 10 degrees, a PhD. You're still gonna mess something up. So just having a fresh set of eyes or additional controls in place to catch this kind of stuff is critical to a longevity or a sustainable program overall. So here's the vendor. I'll call them out. That's fine. And I mean, they literally labeled the API key in their JavaScript.
It's not their problem. It's CNN's problem.
So it's CNN's API key to that third party.
Yes. So like right out the API key, you'll find it where the black mark is. But essentially, I mean, they even labeled it .javascript API key.
So you can find it.
Well,
Yeah.
let's be clear though. Let's be 100% clear. That API key maybe does nothing more than grab one specific thing. It doesn't mean that it's going and grabbing the holy grail of information.
Absolutely.
But it's a starting point, pivot point.
It's absolutely starting.
It's a great recon phase if you're a pen tester. But I will say, it's something that developers need to debug their code. I mean, growing up, if anyone's ever taken a coding class, you comment your code. And when you're working with thousands of lines of code, you forget some stuff.
And that's something also like a Qualys web application scanning wouldn't have found, probably wouldn't have reported on.
No.
But by doing it interactively, it's something that a human can identify.
Absolutely.
As potentially something to investigate, maybe nothing, but it'd be worth checking into if you were testing it.
Absolutely.
We use source code scanning.
What is it?
If you use source code scanning, you would have found it.
If you're doing static analysis or dynamic analysis on the code itself, you may not find you will find the API key, correct, but you may not find the naming convention of the JavaScript. That might not trigger unless you look for it specifically. I would be willing to say that there's a very good likelihood that more content held by them has this kind of naming structure. And again, it could be nothing. It could be nothing. A lot of times it's something, but it could be nothing. So thanks for that clarification. So back to the breakpoint here, which is your intercept proxy. Let's say we're going to go back to web scan test. Oh no, we don't want to do that. We want to just go ahead and web scan. Guess spelled it. Caught it right away. If you take a look at the JX browser built into Zap, or even Firefox, if you set it up and configured it to do so, it'll continue to load. Nothing will show up until you either modify your request, which you can do just directly by typing in here, Linux, Windows, whatever you want to do. This is just a very high-level overview on changing the user agent string or the request going through. You can press the submit and next step button here. It'll push it through one time and capture the very next request coming. Now when you send it in the first time, you can take a look at the response. Oh, back to the break. You can take a look at the response and the level of the code it's choosing. You can click it a few times to kind of get through the main site. But as you can see at the history down here, you'll see, okay, it loaded the main site. Now it's loading the stylus sheet in the back. You'll see the site's not even fully loaded yet. So we'll click it a few times. There, site's fully loaded. Here's the information I got. You can capture the content and change it anytime. Over here on the sites plane, you can go ahead and take a look at the content itself. And let's say I wanted to directly do a Etsy shadow, put that %2 sign plus ET plus, %2 sign plus shadow, whatever you want to do, Etsy password, whatever the command you want to inject, you can do it directly in here. And if you just want it to run after you've gotten your results, you can go back to your break and you hit the play button, it'll continue to go. Then you can introduce a different break. If you just uncheck it, you got your site. Let's say I want to go to, now it's open. Go ahead, automated scanning again. Log in. I'm in. Everything's running in the background. If I want to stop it again, I introduce a different break. Go to that specific URI. Where I would use this in a corporate environment would be creating a break. And an example at a previous employer, we offshored a few URIs over to Amazon, and we remain hosting the main application itself. But the code is hosted in a serverless environment in Amazon, and I didn't want to scan both environments. So I was able to set a break, scan just stuff going over to Amazon. Qualys was a bit of a challenge doing that because it's not really an operating system you're scanning. The web app scan really didn't produce the results that I wanted to see. So I threw it in Zap and I was able to produce it that way. And then again, in that scenario, you would set your session properties, your scanners or Spider or proxy. Spider, you're really not going to care too much, but unless you're producing results on the Spider results. But if you already know your results or your target, you can just specify what you want scanned in here, or what you want ignored in here, I should say. Uncheck the break, let it rip, go back to what you want. Let's go capture it. There we go. User profile, or release that one request, and the passwords. If you want to see if they're, let's see here. Did it capture it? Come on. There's no enter, so I won't let him capture it. But if there was a change password button at the bottom, it'll actually capture the request, and if it's not encoded or encrypted, you can see those credentials in clear text on what the user was changing their credentials to. It is more advanced than the typical scan, produce a report, ship it out. You really kind of get into the nitty-gritty into how web applications work and how the directories need to be configured. And at the end of the day, it's really, there's just so much to it, and we're advancing so far on the web app side that no one knows everything. And if they do, I call bullshit. I mean, it's an ungodly amount of information. A lot of people do specialize and do know a lot of great information, and can definitely help persuade a CISO or a developer to change their habits or recognize a different risk. But at the end of the day, no one knows everything. We are humans, we make mistakes. I mean, Apple is a behemoth. The guy that hacked Apple had a folder on his desktop called Hacky Hack Hack. What was he, 14 years old? I mean, he outsmarted a lot of their engineers right off the bat. So, perfect example. To wrap it up, I'm going to export it as a HTML. Save it. There's your report. You got your highs, mediums, and low. Again, you can change these depending on what you deem necessary. It'll give you a description. It'll give you the URL, the method it found it, the attack it tried to run, cross-site scripting right there, modifying the tokens. And if you go into the, here was cat password, the who is. So if you go back into the actual result under the alerts tab, you'll be able to see the section of the code. They didn't print it out here, but if you go back there, you can actually show a developer, hey, this is where your code messed up at, and here's where it was injected into directly. Focus on here. And from a vulnerability management perspective, that's as much as you should have to do. You can do more if your skill set allows it, but we identify the risk and we give it back to the business to mitigate the risk. We can help direct them as much as we can, even include third-party resources if needed. But at the end of the day, it's on the business to remediate the issue itself.
So on these reports, can you actually customize any of these?
Yes.
Okay.
So on these reports, if you wanted to modify, so cross-site scripting reflected, if I wanted to modify the description for that, I can. If I wanted to dumb it down or change the language to a different, one of my developers, Indian, one of my developers, Chinese, and I need to modify the language, you have that capability. It's being open source, they really give you full reign on what you want to do to a certain extent, but it's more than I've ever had to utilize. And if you want to talk about automation, create a script, grab the output, and create alerts in ServiceNow or tickets in ServiceNow, and go from there. Questions, concerns? Can I go home?
You're doing a great job. Why would you want to go home?
I'm in a doghouse, so I want to go home right now.
She's watching you on the camera. That's good.
She's cussing me out, so she's... but yeah, that's it. If you have any questions or if you want to add to this at all, I am going to write up a quick blog for the MySec website, so we can post that on there. Thank you.